The iron doors slammed behind Tessa Hawthorne before she could draw breath to argue. Stone Basin's deputy shoved her forward into the dim cell, and she stumbled against the wooden bench, bolted to the far wall. Her pulse hammered in her throat. She had not stolen anything. She had been standing at the bank counter with her ranch ledger, trying to negotiate one more extension on the loan crushing Willow Ranch, when the shouting started outside. Men ran past the window. The banker vanished into his office. Then the deputy burst in, grabbed her wrist, and hauled her into the street without explanation. Now she stood in a cell that smelled of old sweat and dirt, her dark green dress dusty from the rough handling, her breath coming too fast. The cell door clanged shut beside her. She turned and saw she was not alone. A man sat on the opposite bench, elbows resting on his knees, head low. His sun-faded brown hair hung slightly long, brushing the collar of his weathered tan coat. He did not look up. Tessa's throat tightened. She recognized him. Roscoe Sloan, the cattle buyer who had arrived in Stone Basin 3 weeks ago, asking quiet questions about herd quality and grazing rights. She had met him once outside the general store. He had tipped his hat, spoken maybe 10 words, and walked on. Now he sat in a cell beside her, silent and still as a stone. Tessa gripped the iron bars and called out, "Deputy, there's been a mistake." The deputy's boots scraped on the plank floor beyond the narrow hall. His voice came back flat. "Judge will sort it in the morning." Tessa's stomach dropped. Morning. She could not afford a night in jail. The ranch hands would wonder where she had gone. The creditors would hear. Everyone in Stone Basin would know by sunrise that Tessa Hawthorne, the respectable widow who ran Willow Ranch alone, had been locked up like a common thief. Her fingers tightened on the bars until her knuckles went white. Behind her, Roscoe finally lifted his head. "You all right?" His voice was low, rough at the edges, but not unkind. Tessa turned. His weathered face held no mockery, no curiosity, just a quiet watchfulness, like he had seen too much trouble to waste energy on surprise. She let go of the bars and crossed her arms. "I don't know. Why are we here?" Roscoe leaned back against the wall. Railroad men claimed someone stole survey equipment from their camp last night. Deputy rounded up anyone who was near the site yesterday. Tessa's breath caught. She had ridden past the railroad camp yesterday afternoon, on her way back from checking fence lines. She had not stopped. She had barely looked. But someone must have seen her. Roscoe watched her carefully. "You ride past their camp?" Tessa nodded. "Yesterday. But I didn't take anything. I didn't even dismount." Roscoe's mouth tightened. "Doesn't matter. Railroad's pushing hard to buy up land for the new line. They want folks scared. Arresting people keeps the town off balance." Tessa's chest went cold. She had heard rumors about the railroad's tactics, but she had been too buried in her own troubles to pay attention. Now those troubles were piling higher. If the judge fined her, she would have no money left for the loan payment due next week. If he did not believe her, she could lose more than the ranch. She could lose the fragile respect that kept Stone Basin's gossips from tearing her apart. She sat down on the bench across from Roscoe, her legs suddenly weak. "This is a disaster." Roscoe studied her for a long moment. "You got people who'll vouch for you?" Tessa hesitated. She had ranch hands, but they were hired men, transient. She had neighbors, but most of them resented her for keeping Willow Ranch when her late husband's creditors thought she should sell. She had no family left, no close friends. The weight of her isolation pressed down like a hand on her shoulders. "Not many," she said quietly. Roscoe nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had spoken. "Same here." The silence stretched. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Tessa studied Roscoe in the dim light. He looked tired, not just from a hard day, but from something deeper. His hands were calloused, his coat mended in 2 places. He did not carry himself like a man who had money or power, just someone trying to stay unnoticed. "Why are you really in Stone Basin?" she asked. Roscoe's gaze flicked to hers, sharp and wary. "Buying cattle. That's what I do." Tessa shook her head. "No. Cattle buyers come with contracts and cash. You've been asking questions, but you haven't made a single offer. You're looking for something." Roscoe's jaw tightened. He looked away. Tessa felt a strange spark of satisfaction. She had hit something true. But before she could press, boots sounded in the hall. The deputy appeared at the bars, holding a tin plate of bread and a cup of water. He shoved it through the slot at the base of the door. "1 meal. Judge comes at 9. He walked away without waiting for a reply. Tessa stared at the plate. 1 meal. For 2 people. Roscoe rose, picked up the plate, and broke the bread in half. He handed her the larger piece and the cup. Tessa blinked. "You don't have to." Roscoe sat back down. "You look like you need it more." Tessa took the bread and the cup, her throat tight. No one in Stone Basin had shown her kindness without wanting something in return. Not since her husband died and left her with a ranch drowning in debt. She sipped the water slowly, watching Roscoe from the corner of her eye. He ate his half of the bread without complaint, staring at the floor. The silence felt different now, less hostile, more like 2 people trapped in the same current, trying not to drown. "Thank you," she said quietly. Roscoe glanced up. His weathered face softened just a fraction. "We're both stuck here. Might as well not make it worse." The night crept by in slow increments. Tessa dozed fitfully, her head resting against the cold stone wall. Every time she woke, she saw Roscoe still sitting upright, watching the hallway. He did not sleep. When the first gray light of dawn seeped through the high window, Tessa sat up fully, her neck stiff and aching. Roscoe finally leaned back, closing his eyes for just a moment. "You didn't sleep at all," she said. Roscoe opened his eyes. "Habit." Tessa frowned. "What kind of habit?" Roscoe's mouth pressed into a hard line. "The kind you learn when staying alert keeps you alive." Before Tessa could ask more, the door at the end of the hall banged open. The deputy strode in, keys jangling. "Judge says you're both free." Railroad men found their equipment in a dry wash 2 miles out. Storm must have carried it. He unlocked the cell door and swung it wide. Tessa stood, relief flooding through her so fast her knees wobbled. She stepped into the hallway, breathing hard. Roscoe followed, his expression unreadable. The deputy jerked his thumb toward the outer door. "Get out, and stay clear of railroad property." Tessa walked into the morning sunlight, blinking against the brightness. Stone Basin's main street stretched before her, dusty and quiet. A few early risers glanced her way, then looked away quickly. Gossip would spread fast, She could already feel the weight of judgment settling over her shoulders. She turned to thank Roscoe, but he was already walking away, head down, hands in his coat pockets. "Wait," she called. Roscoe stopped, but did not turn around. Tessa hurried to catch up. "You helped me last night. Let me return the favor. Come out to Willow Ranch. I'll make you a decent meal." Roscoe turned slowly. His weathered face was hard to read. "You don't owe me anything." Tessa crossed her arms. "I know that. I'm offering anyway." Roscoe studied her for a long moment, and Tessa saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or caution. Finally, he nodded once. "All right. Tonight." Tessa felt a small, unexpected warmth in her chest. She gave him directions, then headed toward the livery to retrieve her horse. Behind her, Roscoe stood in the street, watching her go. By the time Tessa reached Willow Ranch, the sun was high and hot. The ranch house sat low and weathered against the horizon, surrounded by scrub grass and a few struggling cottonwoods. The barn leaned slightly to one side, and the fence line needed mending in a dozen places. Tessa dismounted and led her horse to the barn, where her two ranch hands, Carl and Pete, were mucking stalls. Carl looked up, his weathered face creased with relief. "Thought you weren't coming back, Miss Hawthorne." Tessa forced a smile. "Just a misunderstanding. I'm fine." Pete leaned on his shovel. "Heard you got arrested." Tessa's smile faded. "Word travels fast." Carl shrugged. "Always does, in Stone Basin." Tessa left them to their work and walked to the house. Inside, the main room was dim and cool, furnished with a few rough-hewn chairs, a scarred table, and a stone fireplace that had not been lit in weeks. Tessa set her gloves on the table and looked around. The house felt emptier than usual. She had lived here alone for 2 years, ever since her husband Thomas died in a riding accident. Thomas had been charming and reckless, and he had borrowed money from every source he could find to expand the ranch. When he died, Tessa inherited the land and the debt. The creditors had given her 1 year to pay it back. That year had come and gone. Now she was living on extensions, borrowed time, and the hope that one good cattle sale would turn everything around. She moved to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients for supper. Flour, salt pork, canned tomatoes, dried beans. It was not much, but it was better than jailbread. She worked quickly, her hands moving through familiar motions. Cooking had always steadied her. It was one of the few things she could control. As the afternoon wore on, she kept glancing toward the window, wondering if Roscoe would actually come. He did not seem like a man who made promises lightly. But he also did not seem like a man who stayed in one place long. Just before sunset, she heard hoofbeats. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. Roscoe rode up on a lean gray horse, his weathered tan coat dusty from the trail. He dismounted and tied the horse to the rail, then looked up at Tessa. She felt a strange flutter in her chest. In the low golden light, his weathered face looked less guarded, almost open. "Come in," she said. Roscoe followed her inside, removing his hat and holding it in both hands. The smell of cooking filled the room. Tessa gestured toward the table. "Sit. I'll have it ready in a minute," Roscoe said. Tessa served the food and sat across from him. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was simple but hot. and Tessa saw Roscoe's shoulders relax slightly as he ate. "When was the last time you had a real meal?" she asked. Roscoe paused, then shrugged. "Been a while." Tessa set down her fork. "Why are you really here, Roscoe?" "Not at this table. In Stone Basin." Roscoe's gaze lifted to hers. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "I told you. Cattle." Tessa shook her head. "You're lying. Not about everything, maybe, but about why you're here." Roscoe set his fork down carefully. "Why does it matter to you?" Tessa leaned forward. "Because I took a risk inviting you here. Because I'm tired of people lying to me. Because I think you're running from something, and I need to know if it's going to land on my doorstep." Roscoe's jaw tightened. He looked away, then back at her. His voice came out low and rough. "I'm looking for someone. A man who used to work these parts. I need to find him before someone else does." Tessa's pulse quickened. "Who?" Roscoe hesitated. "A man named Cole Rafferty. He's wanted for robbery. I need to bring him in." Tessa sat back, her mind racing. "You're a bounty hunter." Roscoe's face hardened. "I used to be." Tessa felt a chill run down her spine. "And now?" Roscoe's gaze did not waver. "Now I'm trying to fix a mistake. Cole Rafferty rode with me 5 years ago. We got caught in a bad job. He took the blame so I could walk away. I owe him. But there's a new warrant out, and if the wrong people find him first, he'll hang. I need to get to him before they do." Tessa's throat tightened. "So you're here to save an outlaw?" Roscoe nodded slowly. "Or die trying." The room fell silent. Tessa stared at Roscoe, her thoughts tangled. He was not just a quiet cattle buyer. He was a man with a violent past, hunting another man through dangerous country. And she had invited him into her home. But he had also shared his bread with her in a jail cell. He had answered her questions when he could have walked away. She did not know if she could trust him. But she knew what it felt like to carry a burden no one else could see. "Does anyone else know?" she asked. Roscoe shook his head. "Not yet. But they will. Word's spreading that hunters are moving into the territory. If they get to Cole first, they won't care about the truth. They'll just want the reward." Tessa's chest tightened. She thought about her own secret. The debt that would swallow Willow Ranch if she could not pay. The shame of losing everything her husband had left her, even if he had been the one to ruin it. She had been running too, just in a different way. "I understand," she said quietly. Roscoe's eyes searched hers. "Do you?" Tessa nodded. "I'm drowning in debt. The bank wants this ranch. If I can't pay by the end of the month, I'll lose it. Everyone in Stone Basin thinks I'm managing fine, but I'm one bad week away from nothing. So yes, I understand what it's like to carry something you can't tell anyone." Roscoe leaned back slowly. His weathered face softened. "I'm sorry." Tessa shook her head. "Don't be. I made my choices, just like you made yours." They sat in the growing darkness, the lantern light flickering between them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Tessa felt something shift in the air, a fragile understanding, maybe even the beginning of trust. "If you need help," she said quietly, "I'll do what I can." Roscoe's eyes widened slightly. "Why would you do that?" Tessa met his gaze. "Because you helped me when you didn't have to." And because I think we're both trying to survive something bigger than us. Roscoe nodded slowly. Thank you. But you don't know what you're offering. Tessa's mouth tightened. Then tell me. Roscoe hesitated, then spoke carefully. If Cole's here, he's hiding. Probably using a different name. If I find him, I'll need to move fast. And if the hunters find out I'm involved, they'll come after me too. Tessa's pulse quickened. So, you're risking your life. Roscoe's gaze was steady. I owe him that much. Tessa nodded. Then we'll figure it out together. Roscoe stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face. Finally, he stood. I should go. Tessa rose as well. Come back tomorrow. We'll make a plan. Roscoe walked to the door, then paused. Tessa. She looked up. He turned, his weathered face serious. Be careful. If people find out you're helping me, it could ruin you. Tessa's throat tightened. I'm already ruined. I'm just trying to hold the pieces together. Roscoe's mouth pressed into a hard line. Then we're the same. He left, and Tessa stood in the doorway, watching him ride into the darkness. The wind tugged at her hair. She felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not just fear, not just determination, something warmer, something dangerous. The next morning, Tessa rode into Stone Basin to pick up supplies. The general store was crowded, and the moment she stepped inside, the conversation stopped. Eyes turned toward her. Mrs. Abernathy, the banker's wife, stood near the counter. Her thin mouth pressed into a disapproving line. Tessa kept her chin high and walked to the counter. She ordered flour, coffee, and lamp oil, and paid with the last of her reserve cash. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Abernathy stepped into her path. I heard you were arrested, dear. Such a scandal. Tessa's jaw tightened. It was a misunderstanding. Mrs. Abernathy's smile was cold. Of course. But people do talk. Especially about women who run ranches alone. Tessa felt heat rise in her chest. She forced herself to stay calm. If you'll excuse me. She stepped around Mrs. Abernathy and walked out into the bright sunlight. Her hands shook as she loaded the supplies onto her horse. She could feel eyes on her back, watching, judging. She mounted quickly and rode out of town, her heart pounding. By the time she reached Willow Ranch, her anger had hardened into resolve. She would not let Stone Basin's gossips destroy her. She would not let the bank take her ranch. And she would not let fear stop her from helping Roscoe, even if it was reckless. That afternoon, Roscoe returned. Tessa met him outside, and they walked toward the barn, out of earshot of the ranch hands. Roscoe's face was tight with worry. I found something. There's a man working at the Crowley Ranch, about 10 miles east. Goes by the name Jim Farrow. But his description matches Cole. Tessa's pulse quickened. Are you sure? Roscoe shook his head. Not yet. But I need to get close enough to find out. If it's him, I need to warn him. The hunters are already asking questions in town. Tessa frowned. What hunters? Roscoe's mouth tightened. 3 men. They came in yesterday, asking about wanted men. They're working for a bail bondsman out of Denver. They get paid whether the man comes in alive or not. Tessa's stomach twisted. So they'll kill him if they have to. Roscoe nodded. And if they find out I'm helping Cole, they'll kill me too. Tessa looked toward the horizon. The land stretched wide and empty, dotted with scrub and stone. It was beautiful and brutal, just like everything else in this life. "What do you need from me?" Roscoe turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You're serious?" Tessa met his gaze. "I told you, I'll help." Roscoe studied her for a long moment. "Then I need a reason to be at the Crowley Ranch. Something that won't raise suspicion." Tessa thought quickly. "I can say I'm looking to hire an extra hand for roundup. I'll bring you with me. We'll see if this Jim Farrow is your man." Roscoe nodded slowly. "That could work. When can we go?" Tessa squared her shoulders. "Tomorrow morning. Early." Roscoe's weathered face softened. "Thank you, Tessa." She felt warmth spread through her chest at the sound of her name on his lips. "Don't thank me yet. We might both regret this." Roscoe's mouth curved into a faint, tired smile. "Probably. But I'd rather regret trying than regret doing nothing." Tessa felt something catch in her throat. She nodded and turned back toward the house, her pulse racing. Behind her, Roscoe stood watching the horizon, his shoulders tense. That night, Tessa could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Roscoe's past. He had been a bounty hunter. He had ridden with outlaws. He had made mistakes that still haunted him. And now he was risking everything to save a man who had taken the blame for him. It was reckless. It was dangerous. And it was the most honest thing anyone had done in Stone Basin in years. Tessa rolled onto her side, her mind churning. She thought about her own choices. Marrying Thomas because he had promised her stability. Staying on the ranch because leaving felt like failure. Hiding her debt because admitting it felt like weakness. She had been so careful, so controlled. And where had it gotten her? Alone. Trapped. Drowning. Drowning. Maybe it was time to stop being careful. Maybe it was time to trust someone, even if it was dangerous. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Outside, the wind howled across the open prairie. The next morning, Tessa woke before dawn. She dressed quickly, braided her chestnut hair, and pulled on her riding gloves. Roscoe was already waiting by the barn, his gray horse saddled and ready. Tessa saddled her own mare, and they rode out together into the pale morning light. The land rolled away in every direction, empty and vast. They rode in silence for the first mile, the only sound the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves on dry earth. Finally, Tessa spoke. "Tell me about Cole. What's he like?" Roscoe glanced at her, then looked ahead. "He's stubborn. Loyal. Too loyal, maybe. He grew up hard. His father was a drunk. His mother died when he was young. He learned to survive by doing whatever it took. When we rode together, he was the one who always had your back, even when it cost him." Tessa's throat tightened. "And he took the blame for you." Roscoe's jaw clenched. "We were caught in a bank holdup that went bad. I was young and stupid. Cole was older, more experienced. When the law closed in, he told them I was just a hired hand who didn't know what was happening. They believed him. He went to prison. I walked free." Tessa's chest ached. "And you've been trying to repay him ever since?" Roscoe nodded. "I tried to visit him in prison, but he wouldn't see me. When he got out, he disappeared. I spent 2 years looking for him. Now I've finally got a lead, and there are hunters on his trail. I can't let him hang for something I was part of. Tessa looked at Roscoe's weathered face, and she saw the weight of guilt carved into every line. "You're a good man, Roscoe." Roscoe's mouth twisted. "I'm a man trying to be better than I was." "That's not the same thing." Tessa shook her head. "It's close enough." They rode the rest of the way in silence. By mid-morning, they reached the Crowley Ranch. It was a larger spread than Willow Ranch, with a sturdy house, a big barn, and several corrals. A man in his 50s stood near the corral, watching a young hand work a skittish horse. Tessa dismounted and approached. "Mr. Crowley." The older man turned, his weathered face breaking into a polite smile. "Miss Hawthorne, what brings you out here?" Tessa gestured toward Roscoe. "I'm looking to hire an extra hand for Roundup. I heard you might have someone reliable." Crowley nodded slowly. "I got a few good men." "Who recommended you come here?" Tessa kept her voice steady. "Just word around town." Crowley studied her for a moment, then called out, "Pharaoh!" A man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Tessa's breath caught. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and a hard-weathered face. He moved like someone who had spent time looking over his shoulder. Roscoe went very still beside her. Pharaoh walked over, his eyes flicking from Tessa to Roscoe. His expression did not change, but Tessa saw his shoulders tense. Crowley gestured. "This is Jim Pharaoh. Been working for me about 3 months. Good hand. Reliable." Tessa forced a smile. "Pleased to meet you." Pharaoh nodded once. "Ma'am." His voice was low and rough, and when his eyes met Roscoe's, something passed between them. Recognition. And fear. Crowley looked between them. "You interested, Pharaoh?" Pharaoh's gaze stayed on Roscoe. "What kind of work?" Tessa spoke quickly. "Roundup. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Good pay." Pharaoh hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll think on it." Crowley clapped him on the shoulder. "Let me know by tomorrow." Pharaoh walked back toward the barn without another word. Tessa thanked Crowley and mounted her horse. Roscoe followed, his face unreadable. They rode away from the ranch in silence. Once they were out of sight, Roscoe reined in his horse. "That's him." Tessa's pulse hammered. "Are you sure?" Roscoe nodded. "I'd know him anywhere." Tessa looked back toward the ranch. "So what do we do now?" Roscoe's jaw tightened. "I need to talk to him. Alone. Tonight." Tessa frowned. "That's dangerous. If Crowley sees you, he'll get suspicious. And if the hunters are watching, they'll know something's wrong." Roscoe's gaze was hard. "I don't have a choice." Tessa bit her lip, thinking fast. "Then I'll create a distraction. I'll go back tomorrow and talk to Crowley about hiring Pharaoh. While I'm there, you can slip into the barn and find coal." Roscoe stared at her. "You'd do that?" Tessa met his gaze. "I already said I would." Roscoe's weathered face softened. "You're risking a lot for someone you barely know." Tessa's throat tightened. "Maybe I'm tired of playing it safe." They rode back toward Willow Ranch, the sun high and hot overhead. Tessa's mind raced with plans and fears. She was stepping into something dangerous, something that could destroy her reputation and her ranch. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. That night, Tessa cooked supper again, and Roscoe stayed to eat. They talked quietly, planning the next day's moves. Roscoe would approach the Crowley Ranch from the north, staying out of sight. Tessa would ride in openly and keep Crowley occupied. It was a simple plan, and simple plans often went wrong, but they had no other choice. As the evening wore on, Tessa found herself watching Roscoe more closely. The way his hands moved when he talked, the way his weathered face softened when he smiled, the quiet strength in his voice. She had been alone for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to trust someone, to want someone near. When Roscoe finally stood to leave, Tessa walked him to the door. He paused, looking down at her. "Thank you, Tessa, for all of this." Tessa's heart beat faster. "You already thanked me." Roscoe's mouth curved into a faint smile. "I know, but I mean it." Tessa felt heat rise in her chest. "Be careful tomorrow." Roscoe nodded. "You too." He left, and Tessa stood in the doorway, watching until his silhouette disappeared into the darkness. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. She was falling for him. It was foolish. It was reckless. It was inevitable. The next morning, Tessa rode to the Crowley Ranch alone. She found Crowley near the house, talking to one of his hands. She dismounted and approached with a confident smile. "Mr. Crowley, I've thought it over. I'd like to hire Jim Farrow for Roundup." Crowley nodded. "Good choice. He's a solid worker. Let me get him." He walked toward the barn, calling Farrow's name. Tessa's pulse quickened. She glanced toward the tree line to the north, but she saw no sign of Roscoe. Farrow emerged from the barn, his expression guarded. Crowley gestured. "Miss Hawthorne wants to hire you. 2 weeks. Good pay. You interested?" Farrow's gaze flicked past Tessa toward the tree line, then back. "I'm interested." Crowley clapped him on the shoulder. "Settled then. You can start Monday." Tessa thanked them both and turned to leave. As she mounted her horse, she saw a flicker of movement near the barn's back door. Roscoe. He had made it inside. Relief flooded through her, but she kept her face calm. She rode away slowly, forcing herself not to look back. She was halfway home when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She turned and saw 3 men riding hard toward the Crowley Ranch. Her stomach dropped. The hunters. They wore dark coats and wide-brimmed hats, and their faces were hard and cold. Tessa reined in her horse, her mind racing. If they reached the ranch now, they would find Roscoe and Cole. She had to do something. She turned her horse and rode toward them, waving. "Excuse me." The lead hunter reined in, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" Tessa forced a smile. "I'm looking for the Crowley Ranch. I think I'm lost." The hunter's mouth tightened. "You just came from there." Tessa blinked, feigning confusion. "Did I? I must have ridden past it. Could you point me back?" The hunter stared at her, suspicion flickering in his eyes. Then he jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Back that way. Can't miss it." Tessa thanked him and turned her horse, riding slowly. The hunters spurred their horses and rode past her, heading straight for the ranch. Tessa's heart hammered. She had bought Roscoe maybe 2 minutes. It was not enough. She kicked her horse into a gallop and raced back toward the ranch, praying she was not too late. She reached the ranch just as the hunters dismounted. Crowley stood on the porch, arms crossed. "Can I help you?" The lead hunter stepped forward. We're looking for a man named Cole Rafferty. We heard he might be working around here. Crowley's face hardened. I don't know anyone by that name. The hunter's eyes narrowed. You got a man named Jim Farrow working here? Crowley hesitated. What if I do? The hunter smiled coldly. Then you got Cole Rafferty. And we're taking him in. Crowley's hand moved toward his belt. You got a warrant? The hunter pulled a folded paper from his coat. Right here. Tessa dismounted quickly and walked toward the porch. Mr. Crowley, I can vouch for Jim Farrow. He's been working here honestly. The hunter turned toward her, his eyes cold. Who are you? Tessa lifted her chin. Tessa Hawthorne. I own Willow Ranch. The hunter's mouth curved. Then you should stay out of this, Miss Hawthorne. This is bounty business. Before Tessa could respond, the barn door opened. Roscoe and Cole stepped out, side by side. Roscoe's hand rested near his gun, and Cole's face was set in hard lines. The hunter's hands moved toward their weapons. Roscoe's voice cut through the tension. You don't want to do this. The lead hunter laughed. And why's that? Roscoe's gaze was steady. Because Cole Rafferty didn't commit the crime you're hunting him for. I did. The hunter's smile faded. What are you talking about? Roscoe stepped forward. 5 years ago, Cole took the blame for a bank job I was part of. He went to prison so I could walk free. The warrant you're holding is for a crime that should have been mine. The hunter's eyes narrowed. That doesn't change the warrant. Roscoe's jaw tightened. Maybe not. But it changes what's right. The hunter drew his gun. I don't care about right. I care about the reward. Tessa's heart stopped. She saw Roscoe's hand move toward his gun. She saw Cole tense, and she saw the other two hunters draw their weapons. Time seemed to slow. Then, Crowley's voice rang out. Put the guns down. Now. Everyone turned. Crowley stood on the porch, holding a rifle. His face was hard as stone. I don't allow gunfights on my property. You want to settle this, you do it in town. The hunters hesitated. Crowley's rifle did not waver. I said now. Slowly, the hunters holstered their guns. The lead hunter's face twisted with anger. This isn't over. Crowley's voice was cold. It is on my land. Get out. The hunters mounted their horses and rode away, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Tessa's knees went weak. She leaned against the porch rail, breathing hard. Crowley lowered his rifle and looked at Cole. You're Cole Rafferty. Cole nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Crowley's mouth tightened. You've been a good worker. But I can't keep you on now. Not with bounty hunters circling. Cole's face showed no surprise. I understand. Thank you for what you did. Crowley nodded once, then walked into the house. Roscoe turned to Tessa. You shouldn't have come back. Tessa's throat was tight. I had to. Roscoe's weathered face softened. You could have been shot. Tessa met his gaze. So could you. Cole stepped forward, his hard face unreadable. You must be the woman Roscoe keeps talking about. Tessa blinked. He talks about me? Cole's mouth curved into a faint smile. More than he thinks. Roscoe shot him a warning look. We need to move. Those hunters will be back with the law. Tessa straightened. Come to Willow Ranch. Both of you. You can hide there while we figure out what to do next. Roscoe shook his head. That'll put you in danger. Tessa's voice was firm. I'm already in danger. And I'm not letting you face this alone. Roscoe stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. The three of them rode toward Willow Ranch, moving fast. Tessa's mind raced. She was harboring a wanted man now. If the law found out, she would lose everything. But she could not turn away. Not now. Not when Roscoe and Cole needed her. They reached the ranch as the sun began to set. Tessa led them into the barn, where they unsaddled the horses and settled in. Carl and Pete were out checking fence lines, so the barn was empty. Cole leaned against a post, his face drawn. I didn't want this to happen. Roscoe's jaw tightened. It's my fault. I should have left you alone. Cole shook his head. You came to help. That's more than most people would do. Tessa stepped forward. We need a plan. The hunters will go to the sheriff. The sheriff will come here. We have maybe a day, maybe less. Roscoe looked at her. What are you thinking? Tessa took a breath. We go to the territorial judge in Silver Creek. It's 2 days' ride. If we can get Cole in front of the judge and explain what happened, maybe we can get the warrant dismissed. Or at least get a fair hearing. Roscoe frowned. That's a long shot. Tessa met his gaze. It's the only shot we have. Cole looked at Roscoe. You willing to risk it? Roscoe's gaze was steady. I'm willing to risk anything to make this right. Cole nodded slowly. Then let's do it. Tessa felt a surge of hope. They would leave at first light. They would ride hard and fast. And they would pray the law did not catch them first. That night, Tessa cooked supper, and the three of them ate in the barn, keeping out of sight. Cole was quieter than Tessa expected. He watched Roscoe with a mix of gratitude and sadness. When the meal was done, Cole stood and walked to the far end of the barn, giving Tessa and Roscoe space. Tessa sat beside Roscoe on a hay bale, her shoulder brushing his. You sure about this? Roscoe asked quietly. Tessa nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Roscoe's weathered face softened. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Tessa felt warmth spread through her chest. I'm just doing what's right. Roscoe shook his head. It's more than that. You're risking everything for people you barely know. That takes courage. Tessa looked down at her hands. Maybe I'm just tired of being afraid. Roscoe reached out and gently lifted her chin. His touch was warm and rough. You're not afraid. You're brave. And I'm grateful you're here. Tessa's breath caught. She looked into his eyes and saw something she had not expected. Not just gratitude. Something deeper. Something that made her heart race. Before she could speak, Roscoe leaned in and kissed her. It was soft and careful, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But Tessa did not pull away. She kissed him back, her hands rising to his shoulders. The world narrowed to just the two of them. The warmth of his mouth, the steady beat of his heart under her palm. When they finally pulled apart, Tessa's breath was shaky. Roscoe rested his forehead against hers. I don't know what happens after this, but I know I want you with me. Tessa's throat tightened. I want that too. They sat together in the quiet barn, holding each other as the night deepened around them. The next morning, they left before dawn. Tessa, Roscoe, and Cole rode together, pushing their horses hard. The land stretched wide and empty around them, broken only by scrub and stone. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat cold biscuits. Cole kept watch while Tessa and Roscoe sat together in the shade of a lone cottonwood. Tessa's body ached from the hard ride, but she did not complain. Roscoe reached over and took her hand. "You doing all right?" Tessa nodded. "I'm fine." Roscoe's weathered face was tight with worry. "If this doesn't work, we'll have to run. Leave the territory." Tessa's chest tightened. "I know. Are you ready for that?" Roscoe looked at her. "If it means keeping you safe, yes." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes. She squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Roscoe's mouth curved into a faint smile. Together. They rode on through the afternoon, the sun beating down relentlessly. By evening, they could see the outskirts of Silver Creek. It was a larger town than Stone Basin, with brick buildings and paved streets. Tessa's pulse quickened. They were close. They found a boarding house on the edge of town and took 2 rooms. Cole stayed hidden, while Tessa and Roscoe went to find the territorial judge. They learned that the judge was holding court the next morning. Tessa and Roscoe returned to the boarding house, their nerves stretched tight. That night, Tessa lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Roscoe moving in the next room. She wanted to go to him, to hold him, to tell him everything would be all right. But she did not know if that was true. She closed her eyes and prayed for strength. The next morning, they dressed carefully. Tessa wore her best dress, dark blue with a high collar. Roscoe wore a clean shirt and his weathered coat. Cole wore borrowed clothes, his face pale and tense. They walked to the courthouse together. The building was imposing, with tall columns and heavy doors. Inside, the courtroom was crowded. Tessa's stomach twisted. They found seats near the back and waited. The judge entered, an older man with silver hair and a stern face. Cases were called one by one. Finally, the judge looked up. "Is there any other business?" Roscoe stood. "Your Honor, I have a matter to bring before the court." The judge's eyes narrowed. "State your name and your business." Roscoe's voice was steady. "My name is Roscoe Sloan. I'm here to petition for the dismissal of a warrant against Cole Rafferty." The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward. "On what grounds?" Roscoe took a breath. "On the grounds that Cole Rafferty is innocent. He took the blame for a crime I committed 5 years ago. He went to prison to protect me. The warrant against him is unjust." The judge's face hardened. "That's a serious claim. Do you have proof?" Roscoe hesitated. "I have my testimony." "And Cole's?" The judge looked at Cole. "Stand up." Cole stood, his face pale. The judge studied him. "You were convicted of bank robbery. Served 3 years. Now you're wanted again for a similar crime. What do you have to say?" Cole's voice was low but clear. "I didn't commit the second crime, Your Honor. I've been working honest since I got out. The warrant is based on mistaken identity." The judge turned back to Roscoe. "And you're willing to testify that you committed the first crime?" Roscoe nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm willing to stand trial for it if that's what it takes." The courtroom murmured. The judge raised his hand for silence. This is highly irregular. He looked at Tessa. And who are you? Tessa stood, her legs shaking. Tessa Hawthorne, Your Honor. I own Willow Ranch near Stone Basin. I'm here to testify to Cole Rafferty's character. He worked for a neighbor and was a reliable, honest hand. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at Roscoe. You're confessing to a crime in open court. Do you understand the consequences? Roscoe's jaw was set. I do, Your Honor. The judge leaned back in his chair. I'll need time to review this. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. He banged his gavel. Tessa's knees went weak. Roscoe caught her arm, steadying her. They walked out of the courtroom together, Cole silent beside them. Outside, the sunlight felt too bright. Tessa turned to Roscoe. You just confessed to a crime. Roscoe nodded. I know. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. You could go to prison. Roscoe's weathered face was calm. If it clears Cole, it's worth it. Tessa shook her head. No. There has to be another way. Roscoe cupped her face gently. Tessa, I made my choice. I'm not running anymore. They spent the rest of the day in tense silence, waiting. That night, Tessa could not sleep. She paced her room, her mind spinning. Finally, she knocked on Roscoe's door. He opened it, still dressed. Tessa stepped inside and closed the door behind her. I can't lose you. Not now. Roscoe's eyes softened. You won't. No matter what happens, we'll find a way. Tessa moved closer. Promise me. Roscoe pulled her into his arms. I promise. They held each other in the darkness, clinging to hope. The next morning, they returned to the courthouse. The room was packed. The judge entered and took his seat. He looked directly at Roscoe. I've reviewed the case. The original conviction was based on testimony that Cole Rafferty was the ringleader. If you're now claiming that role, I need more than your word. Roscoe stepped forward. I can provide details only the actual perpetrator would know. The judge nodded slowly. Proceed. Roscoe recounted the robbery in careful detail. The layout of the bank. The timing. The mistakes they made. Cole stood beside him, nodding at key points. The judge listened in silence. When Roscoe finished, the judge looked at Cole. Do you corroborate this testimony? Cole nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Everything he said is true. I took the blame because he was younger and had a chance at a better life. I didn't. The judge's face was unreadable. And the second warrant? The one that brought the bounty hunters? Cole straightened. That warrant is for a robbery I had nothing to do with. I was working at the Crowley Ranch when it happened. Mr. Crowley can testify to that. The judge made a note. I'll send for Mr. Crowley's testimony. In the meantime, I'm dismissing the second warrant due to lack of evidence. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. As for the original crime, I'm reopening the case. Roscoe Sloan, you are under arrest pending trial. Tessa's heart stopped. Two bailiffs moved toward Roscoe. He did not resist. He looked at Tessa, his weathered face calm. It's going to be all right. Tessa's vision blurred with tears. Roscoe. The bailiffs led him away. Cole put a hand on Tessa's shoulder. He did the right thing. Tessa wiped her eyes. I know. but it doesn't make it easier. Over the next 2 weeks, Tessa stayed in Silver Creek. She visited Roscoe every day in the county jail. They talked through the bars, their hands clasped. Roscoe's trial was set for the end of the month. Tessa hired a lawyer with the last of her savings. The lawyer was honest. The best we can hope for is a reduced sentence. Roscoe committed the crime. But his confession and his willingness to make it right will count for something. Tessa's chest ached. How long? The lawyer hesitated. Maybe 2 years. Maybe less, if he shows good behavior. Tessa's throat tightened. 2 years felt like forever. But she did not give up. She wrote letters to the judge, to the prosecutor, to anyone who would listen. She told them about Roscoe's character, his courage, his honesty. Cole stayed in Silver Creek and testified on Roscoe's behalf. Crowley sent a letter confirming Cole's alibi. Slowly, the pieces came together. The trial was swift. Roscoe pled guilty and threw himself on the mercy of the court. The judge listened to the testimony, read the letters, and finally spoke. Roscoe Sloan, you committed a serious crime, but you have also shown remorse and a willingness to make amends. I'm sentencing you to 18 months in the territorial prison, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. Tessa's heart broke and soared at the same time. 18 months. It was not forever. Roscoe looked at her from across the courtroom, and she saw relief in his eyes. After the sentencing, Tessa was allowed a brief visit. She and Roscoe stood on opposite sides of the bars, their hands clasped tightly. I'll wait for you, Tessa said. Roscoe's weathered face was soft. You don't have to. Tessa shook her head. I want to. I love you, Roscoe. Roscoe's eyes filled with emotion. I love you too. And when I get out, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Tessa smiled through her tears. I'll hold you to that. She returned to Willow Ranch alone. The debt was still there. The ranch was still struggling. But something had changed inside her. She was not afraid anymore. She worked harder than ever, hiring Cole to help with the roundup. Together they brought in a strong herd and sold it for a fair price. Tessa paid off part of the debt and negotiated new terms with the bank. Stone Basin's gossip still whispered, but Tessa no longer cared. She had found something more valuable than their approval. She had found courage, and love, and hope. The months passed slowly. Tessa wrote to Roscoe every week, and he wrote back. His letters were short, but full of warmth. He told her about the work he was doing, the men he met, the plans he was making for when he got out. Tessa kept every letter in a wooden box under her bed. She read them on the hardest days, when the loneliness threatened to swallow her. Finally, after 15 months, a letter arrived. Roscoe was being released early for good behavior. Tessa's heart soared. She rode to Silver Creek the next day and waited outside the prison gates. When Roscoe walked out, thinner and more weathered, but with the same steady eyes, Tessa ran to him. He caught her in his arms and held her tight. I missed you, he whispered. Tessa's tears soaked his shirt. I missed you too. They rode back to Willow Ranch together, side by side. The land stretched wide and open before them, full of possibility. When they reached the ranch, Roscoe looked around, taking it all in. It looks good, Tessa. You did well. Tessa smiled. We did well. This is ours now, if you want it. Roscoe turned to her, his weathered face breaking into a rare, full smile. I want it. I want you. I want all of it. Tessa's heart overflowed. Then let's build it. Together. Roscoe pulled her close and kissed her, and Tessa felt the last of her fear melt away. They had fought for this. They had risked everything. And now, finally, they had earned it. A future. A home. A love that was strong enough to survive anything.